Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Corner podcast. I'm Dillon. I'm your host. And now, as always, joined by my blue collar, badass co-host, Matt Vetter. Matt, what's going on, my man?
How's it going, Dillon? These intros keep getting better and better, sir.
I think this one might stick.
I'm okay with that. It's a good one.
Which really, ultimately we're going to talk about it, but how are things going, man?
Pretty good. It's been a week full of test days so far. That happens quite often in construction, but we get through it and keep moving forward, and everything's probably better because of it in the end. Yeah.
So you got to explain to our audience, and those of us that are in Arte that follow Andy Frisella might know what test days are, but explain for everybody else what are test days.
So, and I'm going to paraphrase from his version, but the test day is, the day where everything that could possibly go wrong goes wrong. And, it's more or less, it's the universe testing you. It's putting you up against the wall and seeing how much of more bullshit you can take before you break. So in a nutshell, that's what it is. And, as long as you start learning to like those and to push forward and keep fighting, they're good for you.
Yeah. Andy, our last guest, also agrees that test days are the best days. Now, when you're in them, no, but looking back, for sure.
Yeah, they're good for you. They can add to the stress level, which I think we chatted about a couple of weeks ago, but you got to be able to shake it off, and you can't sweat the small stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. I've had a few of those too. I'm doing some project work right now, and it's one of those things. So I wrote about this a little bit, is you never realize like the things that you're doing until like they're gone, right? So it could be a relationship, right, that you miss, right, or something that or this goes both ways, right, good and bad. This goes for like the one that got away as well as the one you never want to see again, right? It definitely slides both ways, but with a lot of things, like time heals all wounds, right? It's if you did not think about it or deal with it for that time period, right? Now, if you still think about it, if you still live in the past, it's basically still with you. So it's, it didn't heal because it never left. But like in dealing with project work, and I do project work, every little bit, I take some projects and do some actual design work. And it's a reminder at times that there's a reason I don't do these projects as much anymore, just for the stress, the tight deadlines, the kick in the ass that you get for doing these. And I have nothing against late nights. I just like late nights on the projects I want to work on.
That are on your own terms.
Yeah. But yeah, just the feeling of going through stuff and coming back to it where it's like, oh yeah, there was a reason, I made the decisions I did a long time ago. But yeah, it's in construction, there's always something new, man. Always something that you didn't think would happen, or something that went wrong that, you look to fix, and you just get through them and learn from them and move on.
Yeah, that's all you can do. We're always so busy. We have in our company 2 or 3 active projects at any given time, plus all of the prospects we're working on. And it just leads to impossibly busy days where, yesterday I was in meetings from about 7:30 in the morning until 6:30 in the evening. And all the stuff that I planned to do yesterday that was on my neat written out list, none of it got touched. And it just has been one of those weeks. It's not atypical, but you learn to handle them and manage time. That's for sure.
Yeah. And it gets to, we've talked about this before too, but I want to touch on it before we get into our main topic, which is the blue collar badass and future construction. But is you've got to, especially in construction, you've got to do the things you need to do, like whether that's personal, like working out, reading, eating breakfast, or maybe eating period throughout the day. But to take that time for yourself, again, an hour, right, to get through some of this stuff, because otherwise it's not going to get touched, right? Like projects can drag on into the night to get it out or whatever. And more often than not, finding that 30, 45 minutes, hour to just take a break, go for a walk, do something is going to, it's going to improve your mental state, which we're all about here, right? Being happier, more productive, all that kind of stuff, which we'll get into today too, but is also, you're probably going to be more productive when you come back, right? Your eyes took a break from looking at those sheet sets and seeing the same things over and over again. You're going to see a new solution probably on your walk or at the break. You're going to like, oh, if I just do this, it'll all work out. So often those breaks can be far more beneficial than just to continue plowing through everything that you have going on.
Without a doubt, you need to have a little bit of time to hear yourself.
All right. So the main event for today, you have been working on this thing called the Blue Collar Badass, which awesome freaking name, by the way.
Thank you.
But I'm going to let you lead this one off. What is the Blue Collar Badass? What have you been working on? And why is this so important to you?
So, as we talked about, I've been involved in construction in some shape or form for over 2 decades now. It's an industry that I know intently. I love intently. I choose to be here, right? I'm not being forced to stay here. And we've kind of chatted before about the future of construction in general. And, I think there's a huge problem that we're starting to see now, and we're heading towards it even more so, in that we have a giant lack of skilled labor and really an overall lack of interest in construction in general. And I think there's some reasons why that we'll touch on today, but over the last couple of years, I kind of started having this feeling that I need to be doing something to help this situation other than just continuing to run our company and build projects. And so it's kind of been a side project of mine. I came up with the name Blue Collar Badass. To be quite honest with you, right now it's still a pretty disorganized mess of ideas. I scratched together a pretty horrible looking logo on PowerPoint. I bought a domain, which for the record, I bought bluecollarba.com because it was $12 a year. Blue Collar Badass was more like $600 a year. It's probably easier to market with the BA at the end anyways. And I started some social media, handles, and my intent is to bring awareness to this issue, to somehow get the youth of today more interested in construction in general, to start backfilling the population, so we can have a farm team again. Because if we don't, we're in for a world of trouble. We see, like right now, we're in a massive pricing shift in the market primarily because of COVID last year. Commodities pricing is going through the roof. Now, if you add to that, all of our materials are more expensive, and now all of a sudden we don't have enough labor, so labor becomes more expensive. How does anyone afford to build anything anymore?
Okay, a few big points here. So in dealing with a lot of the projects that I've worked on, right? I mean, it's big commercial stuff, and you get like, as much as so there's a like and dislike factor here, but so hospitals are probably one of they can be the best and the worst clients to work for. they're the best and they understand construction. One, they kind of don't care on cost. I mean, they do, but they don't. And then so that's a good and bad, but they understand construction, which is huge. And then the other side of like hospitals and healthcare is when they want it now because they need that room up and running to be built. But they're kind of a unique market segment. And then on the other side of that, you work with like school districts, let's say, or a community district, which I know you're building a community center now. Mm-hmm. And those people have no clue. They build a building once every 10, 20 years, probably the only time in their career that they'll put together a building. They just, you don't need them that often, especially in school districts that aren't growing. Now there's exceptions to this all over the place, but 95% of all school districts don't build, or they build once every 10, 20 years.
Right.
So you have, so what Matt is talking about, and all of us in the industry know that when those projects come up, you have your standard designs. This is typically what it costs. And then you have these big pricing shifts, right? So labor is like half the cost of any given job, right? Like just off the bat, labor overhead, that's half, if not more. And then material costs, let's just say it's 40% in there. And let's say that increases 10%, right? It's probably more than that, but let's just say 10%. So now your overall cost of the job went up 5%, right? Immediately. That's usually contingency. So you just blew contingency. Now, let's say labor went up 10% just because you couldn't get anybody. Like now you're paying overtime. So really 10% is light, but okay, half the job, 40%, there's another 5%. So now you need to cut 10% out of the project and not have any problems, because those never happen on the job site, to get that project in under budget. So just like these two things, right? Not same design, same everything. Prices just went up 10% across the board for manufacturing being decreased because they had their own constraints and what they could do, people in the factories, everything like that, shipping stuff in from overseas, whether that could be the UK, let alone China or Brazil for steel. Like, I mean, we're in a global economy. This is not just a China thing. This is like you're getting steel from Brazil or, whatever from Europe. We're very much in a global economy. So then material, or you just can't get it. So now your job site's down for however long, to then now you're able to work, but now the crew that you wanted is somewhere else. Like this all goes into the supply chain, getting people on site at the right time, which we talked about last time. And, if you have people on top of each other, that's a problem. That increased costs versus, being able to streamline everything. So I just want to point out here, like what we're talking about is in trying to bring people into the trades so that you have more people in it. And ultimately the thing that and then I'll give it back to you, Matt, but the thing that here too is that having more people in the trades isn't going to take away somebody's job, right? Having more people in the trades isn't going to take away projects, right? Those projects need to get built one way or the other. What it's going to help do is, so if you're an electrician, you're a plumber, you're a craftsman, tradesman, superintendent, whatever, somebody on a job site, now you're still going to have your job. You're probably not going to work 60 hours a week for 6 months out of the year, right? Break your back, everything else that goes into that. And then you can work for an extra 5-10 years, right? So you're going to forfeit maybe a little bit of overtime so you can sit on the couch at home and recuperate versus, having to kill yourself on a job site, get tired, accidents happen, right? That's when people get hurt, is in those overtime hours. So at the end of the day, this is still making sure that you can go home, you can have a good and better life and really extend the length of your career and not have to worry about, medical problems down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you don't have quality of life, then you have nothing really at all. And if you're working too much and unscrupulous hours, it's dangerous all around. it breeds a question though, right? I think in that, where did this shortage come from, and what happened? Because if you think back to when you're a kid, you don't have kids, Dylan, but I have a gaggle of them. As a child, what kid doesn't play with construction equipment, right? Drive Tonka trucks and plastic hammers and all that stuff. Something disconnects though from that point to the point when you come out into the workforce or out of high school. And it's, Mike Rowe, the Dirty Jobs guy, has a quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it and probably butcher it, but it's basically along the lines that pop culture has really glorified the corner office, right? It's glorified the corner office job, the white collar job, but it has, in doing that, and maybe unintentionally, but it's built this belittling effect of the jobs that were created that went to build that corner office, and you can't have one without the other. And I think, there's a lot that goes into it, but it starts in school and middle school to a degree, but high school certainly. We have talked about the Voc Tech programs a couple times. We talked about it last week when Andy was on. When I was in school, Voc Tech was not a quote unquote good thing to be involved in. It was for the dumb kids. It was for the path of travel that most people didn't want to go. And nowadays it sounds like that may be changing. There's some schools around here, and Andy mentioned it last week that there are schools with Voc Tech programs that are getting better, but there's still a general unacceptance of the trades as a worthwhile career. Shop class. What the hell happened to shop class? It's gone now, almost 100% from most schools. And if you go back not so long ago in history to 2001, when our president signed into act the No Child Left Behind Act, all of a sudden schools now who are competing on funding ferociously to begin with, it took the underperforming schools, and now in order to qualify for funding, they can only qualify based on standardized testing grades. Well, shop class doesn't provide standardized testing grades. Home ec class doesn't provide them. So all those things kind of got cast to the wayside, and we got pigeonholed as a educational society, if you will, into just the classes, the academic side classes that can produce a grade to produce the funding to keep the school running. Obviously, we have to keep them running, but it's a big, deep rabbit hole of a problem. And then, on top of that, it's society's insistence now on college. That going to college after high school is the only way to a rewarding career. And we've talked about my crazy path before. I went to college. I ended up graduating. I could argue either way, but I also have a lot of close friends and associates that didn't go to college, make far more money than I ever probably will, are happy as can be in their careers. And, there's ways to get to the end that don't always have to follow the same road. So I think it's been going on for a long time. I think, it's something that's not easy to fix. We can't overnight fix it, but we need to start trying, because we're neglecting kids, really, in the sense that we're trying to force feed them into different occupations that are deemed more worthwhile in society, but there really is no basis for that deeming, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. And a couple good comments here on a lot of this is, so there are people that are mechanically inclined, right? Like, honestly, I'm not one of them, right? Like, I am great math, science, abstract stuff I can do. Part part of that is I also did like farmers markets growing up. So like I, could do simple math and count change back, right? Like I grew up doing a lot of that stuff, and people I think lose some of those small little skills. And then with, schools, and we talk about kids and education, I am all for education. And I think one of the other pieces that we go into is when we talk about education is people just think school, that whether it's your K-12 or higher ed, that is the way to get educated. And there's I think a big misnomer, right? That the only way to get education is to be in this school system and follow this path. But yet, like the average person reads like a book a year, not even self-development. So when you start going down like the education route, which I think is a big crux in what we talk about, is you don't need to go to school for education, right? There's a lot of ways to get educated and to learn stuff. But the other thing too is, unless you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer in some regards, right? So construction is the only engineering industry that requires a stamp, right? I can design a car, it can kill millions of people, and nobody is responsible for it. Buildings, on the other hand, right, or any public infrastructure project, somebody at the end of the day is responsible for their trade, right? So you do have to have licensure. You can do that actually through, depending on the state, you can do that through just time in the industry. It takes a lot longer, but there is a path for it. Law in the same regard, you can become a barred lawyer if, in certain states, right? This is all state dependent on, time in the industry, passing the bar and all that kind of good stuff. Doctors, you do have to go to school for that. But there's like 3-4 professions, right? Outside of that, you don't need college, right? You don't need college to start a business. Like it's just not it. And then when we look at trade, and I think where a lot of this goes is to, people have innate skills, innate things that they're really good at, right? Some people can think abstractly. Some people need like concrete things. Some people are really good mechanically. Like they just can put stuff together and see, how it's going to end up being. And we need to, when we look at like our kids, and you could talk more to this one, is, each kid has their own talent, right? And parents know this, and you're still wanting to, I'm not saying you, but like people in general want to shove them in the like same box, right? They want to put them in the same hole, or that like, I need to learn a foreign language, but is this going to really benefit me? Maybe.
Knowledge is powerful regardless of where it comes from. So I'm not a opponent of schooling and of college by any means, but you kind of nailed it in that there's, everybody's so vastly different. Everybody learns differently, and there's no right or wrong way to get where you're going. And there's no saying that you can't go back and do it over either. If let's say you go into the trade, I mean, I'm an okay example of that. I went into the trades very young. I dropped out of college and decided I didn't need it. And I did it for a while. And then I went back to college because I decided I need it. But all it really did for me, I mean, it was a good experience. I took away a lot from it, I'm sure, including student loans. But I could absolutely be where I'm at now, having not gone that path. And I just pulled up the comments, and Andy brings up a really good point in that, the trades lost their sex appeal when you get that, you don't want to be like that guy, do you? You don't want to end up like him, and Andy mentions portraying them as dirty, uneducated knuckle draggers. That's kind of that mentality that has been proliferated for quite some time into the industry. And it, as a kid, an impressionable youth, of course, if that's all you're hearing is, all those dirty guys sitting on the side of the road, catcalling women as they walk by, You don't want to be one of those assholes in the hard hats. And, it has a negative effect all the way across, and it creates this social bias towards the trades in general. But, the other thing to keep in mind too is, you mentioned yourself as not being incredibly mechanically inclined. Nowadays, and we touch on this probably every episode that I've been on so far, construction is so tech dependent and so tech heavy that you don't necessarily have to be the guy out swinging the hammer. You don't necessarily have to be the guy down in the bottom of the trench shoveling dirt, but you could be doing the BIM side of it, doing the design side of it, planning and scheduling and innovating. And there's so much else involved with the trade work that just doesn't get much light of day.
Construction can never be outsourced, right? So when we talk about bringing manufacturing back to the US, or heck, this applies to any country, right? Like, you want to bring manufacturing back to your country, your industry, whatever, it cannot be outsourced. Like, just like getting a haircut, you're not outsourcing that, right? That is a local thing. Construction is a local deal. There are a few big mega construction companies, but they all have local offices, and they make a point of having a local office. So this is a very location dependent deal. Even some of the biggest firms, on the engineering side, design side, they have one typically major office. They might be in a bunch of different locations, but they have one main office where probably half their staff is. And then they just have these tiny little satellite offices. So when we talk about a lot of this too, it's construction is your local economy. Like, just look at 08 to 12, right? That was construction. That was housing. And I mean, Matt and I are more on the commercial side, or really all on the commercial side. But you talk about how many trades are in residential. I mean, it's huge. When you go and look at construction, so when you look at construction, commercial construction, I think the last numbers I saw were in 2019, not including like roads and all that stuff. It's an $800 million a year industry. And that's just commercial. That's strictly commercial numbers. When you start including roads, that's another, I don't know, 400 billion. Like, it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry, right? Or not 800 million. So it's 800 billion is what commercial was in 2019. And then like you add the number is pretty big. It's in the billions for like roads and, horizontal construction. And then you add another trillion for residential. And then all the things on top of that with financing and real estate and, mortgages and all that stuff. I mean, construction as a whole is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. Let's just say it's 2 trillion. That is 10% of the US economy.
It's huge, and it can't go anywhere. You can't. There's cool videos on YouTube of robots laying bricks. It'll never replace the human element to it. And you mentioned not being able to outsource it. You can't outsource it. It's impossible. And there's huge companies like you touched on, but there's a lot of small companies too. And the huge guys, they're never going anywhere either. We need them for certain things, but the projects, candidly, that I look at, those guys would never shake a stick at it. They don't want anything to do with it. And so the smaller, and I'm saying smaller, genuinely, the lower dollar volume, less than hundreds of millions of dollars type projects, those have to be served by smaller local companies to some degree. And, it's a huge economic factor. It's a giant spinning wheel. All of these companies have employees. We all have suppliers and vendors and subcontractors. And, the web that we create is so vast. It really spans and it touches everyone.
And it goes up and down, like, from the fleet of vehicles, to the auto mechanics, to the, tire guy, to the warehouses, the storage facilities, the financing. And that's ultimately what it comes down to, right? These big companies, they're going to do these mega projects because they can finance them, right? They've got the cash to do them. And these little stuff, they have more overhead than the project is worth to deal with. And then it's vice versa for you, where, you're not going to be able to finance $1 billion project. But these other ones are, small business, great contribution to GDP. Yeah, exactly. I mean, most companies are in that, they're under 100 people, right? Like small business is anything under 500 people. Like so like 98%, 95, it's a huge number, right? Huge percentile is small business, right? And that's like all of construction, right? Is under 500 people, except for maybe a couple hundred firms across the country, right? So you maybe got 10 in a state that are above that threshold. So, with a lot of this is the trades are super important. You need to, it's not going anywhere. And even let's talk about that masonry robot. So with the masonry robot, you still need somebody to load bricks. That is a US based company, right? Like you need somebody to service and maintain the robot. That mortar still came from a local place, or you're mixing it yourself for all the material to do that, right? So somebody still had to store the bricks. Somebody still had to transport the bricks. Somebody still had to load the bricks in the robot. It's saving. And then the guy loading the bricks and the mason can do all the craft pieces that are needed, the like high-end craftsmanship. They can focus on that and not break their back doing all the, general wall masonry. They can do the actual like high skill pieces, not the lower, apprentice stuff. So now that guy is way more productive. That masonry company is much more profitable. They can do more projects with, the lower amount of people in the labor force that want to do masonry. So now, like, that robot to me is one, a huge benefit. It's not taking anybody's job, and it's really making that guy last probably 20 years longer in the industry because he's doing upright work. He's got to load, move the same bricks that he was going to have to move anyway. And then he's not doing the repetitive hand motion. So no carpal tunnel, not, there's up and down the line. It helped make them more productive, safer. And it's still like all the other jobs that went around that masonry, getting it to the site, all that stuff, those still exist, right? Like they're still there. So that robot just made the company more profitable, not like taking anybody's job or harming anything. And it's a local thing, right? It's still doing like at that job site.
And it breeds new jobs. Right? Because now you have to have a mechanic to take care of the thing, and you have to have the operator to operate it. It's all cyclical, and it's not a bad thing at all. But I think that sort of stuff goes to help make the trades cool again, and that's the biggest fight we have right now. Right? Is how do we shift that mindset? How do we shift it back to respecting the blue collar badass? Because construction, it results in tangible product, right? It's solving real world problems, and it's adding real value. And no offense to those that do it, but the TikTok millionaires, that's a fine path to go. But that stuff comes and goes with the wind. The trades and building is here to stay. So we collectively need to keep working to keep this mindset shift that you and I are trying to do, to keep it growing and to push people back into the trades again.
Yeah. And great point, man. Like construction is not going away. Like this is not a thing that's ever going to go away. And even if, virtual reality did take it over, you still need to build some data centers.
Yeah.
Like those aren't going away. You still need a warehouse for food. You still need a grocery store, right? Like even if we go through all this, like the amount of warehousing and data centers that were built in 2020 is astronomical. Like any design firm that I talked to that was in those two markets were busier than they'd ever been. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into those. But so when you talk about a lot of this stuff, construction never going anywhere, right? Always going to be a high paying job, right? It's going to be, and for the trades, they have at most like a couple years into like electrician school or apprentice school. It's not that much money, right? They're going to pay that off, or their employer is going to pay for it. So the biggest thing that I see across the industry, and the reason why people don't stay, is, well, a fewfold. One, you get beat down. So you have to, keep your spirits high. You have to look for solutions, not problems. And that's probably the biggest thing. When we talk about mental health and everything that goes into construction, you get beat down a lot, and you got to take it with a grain of salt. You got to have some thick skin, and you got to look for, again, solutions, not problems. You can't keep pointing out problems. That's just a recipe for disaster. But the other thing in construction is, if you care, if you do a good job, you're never going to be without, right? You will never not have a job. People will want you on their job sites. People will want to work with you. We've covered this a ton, and this goes for any industry, but especially in construction. When you have a lot of grumpy people on site, being that ray of sunshine, being the person, they might be annoyed that you're whistling Dixie, but at the end of the day, they're going to miss it when it's not there, right? To what we talked about earlier. So having those people that are super happy, that are enthusiastic, that want to be on the job site and make other people want to show up to, hear Bob whistle again, that's going to be it's a great day for a lot of people. But you have to be that kind of ray of sunshine in a cloudy storm, which is a lot of construction. But again, looking for solutions, being the positive person out there on the job site is going to help everybody. It will make you never be without a job, even in the worst of construction times, because everybody will want you on their job site.
And you can't be afraid of hard work. The benefit of a lot of jobs is the hard work. The power is in the process. So there's Tim Kennedy had a quote that I've taught my boys, my kids, in that everything you ever want in life is located on the other side of hard work. And people shy away from it. People, there's a mindset that, construction's too tough. It's too difficult. It's manual labor, or it's too difficult, mentally putting projects together and keeping things organized. And it is tough. It is hard work. It's supposed to be hard work. Anything you do. And I would argue that with lots of professions, not just construction, but you have to learn to value the hard work. And I think, societies of the past really got that. My grandfather busted his ass every day and loved doing it. Well, we kind of made this shift and this slide, and everyone's gotten soft, and there are no trophies, first place trophies anymore, and everyone wins, and that's all garbage. That none of that will maintain. So once we get back to the hard work and getting back into the trades and getting back people. I mean, the other thing too is, we celebrate entrepreneurship a lot in this country, as we should. You're an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur. We're in an entrepreneurial group. We know hundreds, if not thousands, of entrepreneurs. Well, look at construction. I mean, the number of trades that are entrepreneurial based companies is astounding. I can't tell you how many companies we work with every single day that were started with one person with an idea, or two people with an idea, and now it's grown into to the industry that it is. You can be heavily involved in this industry. You can make a ton of money, and you can be that prototypical entrepreneur and have that lifestyle. Because I can tell you one thing, myself personally, I don't like working for anybody else anymore. I've done it, and I shine better doing my own thing and creating my own. And this is an industry that allows for that and promotes it. And it just needs to be celebrated, I think, and really put in the limelight more often than it is.
And with that too, there's a lot of room for entrepreneurs, right? So you don't want to take, because really in construction, it's a big financial risk. Let's just, dealing with cash flow, which is a word, if you've worked for a company, you don't know, right? Unless you're in finance or accounting. So cash flow is a huge deal for anybody on both really throughout construction, design side, build side. Everybody struggles with cash flow. So, okay, outside of that risk, but it's huge for entrepreneurship, right? So any person working at a firm that figures out how to do something better, right? Which is basically all an entrepreneur does, right? We find solutions and we sell it to the market. You're just selling it into your company, right? Finding a new process, a new tool, of whatever. That's entrepreneurship, right? You have one client and that is your company, right? That is your boss. That is the people that make decisions within your firm. So it's huge, right? Everybody's always looking for a better way to do something, right? A new tool, something that'll help them do it faster, something that'll save them the, pain of doing something, right? Like a simple thing is, so there's new tools out there for like splicing fiber optic cable, right? It used to be a huge pain, very highly skilled to do that, to make sure that communications went, because, to align the light within those cables are pretty difficult. Probably 5 years ago, a tool came out to where you could place two cables in a box and it would splice it, right? Became the simplest thing to use. Now it's not a skilled thing. Quality went up and you improved, right? So finding that tool, if you were in a fiber company, right, that did any type of fiber work, that was a great thing to sell into your organization, right? If you're one of the first companies to do that, you did pretty well.
Yeah. Innovation. Innovation drives this industry, and it's what will help it survive. When I did work for a previous company, one of the aspects they really touted was that, everyone in the ranks, from the guy in the field to the guy in the corner office, you're all entrepreneurs. And what they would tell me or tell us is, you run your section of this business, of this company, as if it's your own business, and you're responsible for it, but you're also able then to be the entrepreneur and to innovate and to come up with new ideas and to leave your mark on the company and on the industry.
And that's how everything should be run. And with a lot of this, you've got to continue to learn, right? You've got to continue to grow. You've got to understand the tools that are across the market. And far often than not, there's a lack to learn. And I'll hammer on this till the cows come home, right? Like it is the one thing that we need to all do continuously. And that is learn, that's read like trade journals, that's seeing what's out there, seeing the new solutions, even if it's assigning somebody in your office and your team to go and try it. If it's you doing stuff in your off hours, one, that's how you're going to move up in a company. Two, that's how, if you're a company owner, that's how you're going to make more money and improve and get better. And by doing this, you're going to have just so much improvement, right, over a period of time, right? It could be a year, it could be 5 years. You do this consistently enough, you're going to be one of the top firms in the world. One of the things that you look at the design world in particular, like let's take Gensler, right? So Gensler is the largest, I think, straight architecture firm in the world. They're like 40 years old. They do $1 billion in revenue. And when we look at construction, that is not very old, right? Most construction firms that you see out there are 100 or 80 years old or whatever. Gensler became that in I think it's Art Gensler, right? In his lifetime, became the largest design firm in the world. It's possible, right? But that became from continuous improvement, effort, branding, everything that goes into building a company. You can't do that with, Gensler is not drawing things by hand, right? Let's take those examples of, you've got to learn, you got to develop your own tools. SOM had basically a Revit tool 25 years ago that they built in-house and spent millions on. So a lot of this is, you got to be willing to learn, and this is across the board. I don't care, from electrician to plumber to pipe fitter to engineer to GC, you have to learn. You have to continue to improve on your craft. And you're not, this is the other thing in construction too, you're not better or worse than anybody else, right? You're not. You might know more, you might have some different experience than another guy, but we're not better or worse than anybody. Somebody just hasn't learned that lesson yet that you probably had to learn the hard way. So let's be a little more kind, a little more empathetic. You never know what somebody's going through for like all the mental health stuff, right? They could have problems at home or whatever, but just know that you're not better or worse. You just might have to spend some time to educate, to train, to enlighten the people that are around you so that they understand where you're coming from. And email is not the best way to communicate that, right? Pick up the phone, have a phone call, or talk to them in person to work through whatever thing you're dealing with.
Yeah. And to add to that, there is no difference in quality of an individual, whether they're in the corner office in a suit selling the project, or they're in the field in blue jeans building the project. There's got to be that mutual respect across the board. And, the only place you start at the top is digging a hole. So everybody works, and you got to work your way up in any industry. You can be wherever you want to get to if you set your sights on the office side, or if you set your sights on running the field. It's all possible. It just takes hard work, and we just have to keep spearheading this movement to make the trades cool again, to make it acceptable, or not, or make it a good idea, make it a valuable commodity to be the blue collar badass, whether you're that guy in the office or that guy in the field. Yeah.
I mean, construction is a great, I was the kid that built like cushion forts,
Oh, yeah.
as a kid, right? Like tearing apart the house and doing all that kind of stuff. So with a lot of this, it's not only building things, right? Seeing things come to fruition, seeing them stand the test of time, right? You look at electronics, your laptop's bad in 3 years, right? Like construction is the thing that stands the test of time, right? It's going to be there for 10 years before renovation. Maybe that's on like the fast side of the cycle, probably 50 years before one and it'll stand for 100 if you take care of it. So, construction's here to last. It's not going anywhere. It's one of the oldest industries there is. And it's a good paying job, right? We all have our cycles, right? Of boom and bust. But again, if you're good at what you do, there's always going to be a place for you.
Definitely. So I think we just continue to spearhead this. If anyone out in the audience or anyone in our network has a connection to Mike Rowe, I think he'd make a great guest for the podcast.
Yeah. I mean, the field can be a dirty place, right? Often is. But at the end of the day, when you do those final sweeps, walkthroughs, right? It's beautiful. There's nothing like walking through a fresh building. Nothing.
I'd agree 100%.
And most people just don't, right? Most people don't get to experience what a new build looks like. They don't get to walk through it on the first day, right, of it being open, of everything working the way it's supposed to, right, on day one. And there's nothing like that feeling.
Yeah, it's truly almost a magical thing. It's not as cool as seeing your children born, but it's a close second. When you've worked on something, blood, sweat, and tears for however long the project lasts, to see it come to fruition, and when you were the one making it happen and helping to do it, there's no better feeling.
Now we didn't cover too much in the future of construction, but ultimately construction's here to stay, right? Where the blue collar badass, right? Like construction up and down the chain is a good industry. It's a good place to be. You're going to earn a very good living. If you own a firm, you're going to make great living as long as you run it well. But with that, it's a great industry to be in. There's a ton of opportunity. Again, it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry, and that's just in the US. Globally, it's 10 times that. So when we look at construction, the built environment, there's a lot of money in it to be made to help improve. And frankly, more projects would be built if we didn't have the labor shortage. We would have more great buildings. We would have more great things opening, more apartment complexes, condos, offices, like you name it. They're ready to be built. We're just waiting on, some of it's just waiting on the labor force to be available to start the project.
Yeah. I mean, this country was built on hard work, right? And that's how we're going to keep going into the future. We just gotta keep working hard on our end to keep spreading the word.
Yeah. And I mean, everybody out there, like have, in a lot of the firms that I've worked in, it's, have those job shadows, reach out to your middle and high schools, right? Have people come into the office or go out in the field, to do a day or whatever, probably in the summer, right? To go and either be in the office. And this is for, everybody, right? Subs, GCs, design firms, bring people into the office, bring people out on site with you, right? Have them shadow somebody and see if it's an industry they want to be in, right? This is something that we could do. This is a career path. This exists. This is the other thing. Show up to career fairs. I've done a number for like my alma mater when I lived back in the Midwest. Like I went to a bunch of career fairs to talk to like high schoolers, right? Namely, I was showing up there for like Rose Holman, but for my college to say that like, hey, engineering is also like a degree that you can go and do, right? But as well as, as a company, I think more companies should show up to like high school career fairs, to show up to those types of events to say, hey, like we exist. Do you want a summer job like as a high schooler, right? Reach down into the community, right? You're not looking for somebody that's just 18 or in college or whatever. You can, start younger and have people to help you. Maybe it's not in the field, maybe it's in the office, but find some places for them to let them know that, hey, construction is more than you see on TV, right? It's something that, is a career path. It might not be it's not for everybody. Let's just be straight with that. But it is a good option for a lot of people that might not know about it or how to get started.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of those initiatives, of Blue Collar BA that myself and my business partner, we're trying to kind of format that locally. How can we interject and inject ourselves into the high school programs? And, we don't have a ton of interns that come and work for us, but to bring kids out for a day, just to show them, here's a real life shop class. Check it out. I think it could be real powerful. So it's just going back to the very beginning here with test days. It's one of those things that it takes time. It takes time to put these programs together and to make those introductions. And it's important. So, maybe I'll work late tonight and keep going on it.
Yeah. it's showing people like clearing a site, right? Like showing them that, hey, somebody is driving that dozer, right? Somebody's digging those holes with an excavator. Somebody is, like there's a person that's their job, and here's how much money they make, right? Roughly, like it's and that's the other thing in construction. Like a lot of people, you basically know what other people make. It's one of those few industries where you kind of know what a, journeyman electrician makes, right? Like it's just known. So that's the other thing through a lot of this is, everybody wants a real life Tonka truck and to drive them around.
Absolutely. That I can't tell you how many times I've jumped on machines. I carry a master key ring in my truck that I can get into all of them. So once in a while on the weekends, you might find me out there pushing piles of dirt that don't necessarily need to be pushed.
I grew up with cattle, and one of the things that we would do on one of the ranches that we'd run cattle on is the guy that owned it was a logger. So this was when I lived in Oregon on the coast. And so, I mean, that's when you get 120 inches of rain, trees kind of grow pretty quickly. So we had to put up some fence, and we did like one of the head gates, right, for kind of like the master gates to come through. So usually those are big, bulky deals. So we use railroad ties as the ends for the gate. We dug a hole with the excavator, set the post, or we'd hold the post, and then the guy was a good enough operator to where he just pushed the dirt back with the excavator and set up a post. And then for the other posts, we'd use pointed, fence posts. Mm-hmm. So one person would stand, hold the pointed fence post because it's got the pencil point on it, and the dirt would be, light enough to where somebody hold it, put the bucket on it, and then you just drive it right into the ground. Easiest way I've ever done fence posts versus having to, dig out a hole. But that's equipment is cool, and you get to play with a lot of the big toys when you're on, especially like in the beginning of projects, right? Moving dirt and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, I will more frequently than I like to admit, even to myself, I'll find that I'm watching videos on LinkedIn or somewhere on social of, the crane operators throwing basketballs into hoops, or, all that sort of stuff, which I better never see on one of my job sites, but it's just fun stuff. It goes back to that childhood curiosity of big trucks and, banging things together.
And that's a skill, man, to be able to do that, the skill of those operators to, finally grade something or throw whatever. It's a skill.
Yeah. The skill we need more of.
All right, guys, that's going to be, we're going to wrap up the episode here talking about blue collar. We love talking about this stuff. So again, if anybody's got a contact to Mike Rowe, we'd love to have him on, talk some dirty jobs, and, in construction. But with that, any closing words you want to leave, Matt?
Just that, keep following along. Dillon and I are working to try and bring awareness to the industry as a whole in all facets, and, help us spread the word. We don't ask for payment or anything, but sharing this around and telling your friends or telling people in the industry, all of that helps, and it helps us do what we're trying to do. So let's get after it.
Yeah. Back to work. So yeah, thank you all for joining in live here on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook. Thank you all for commenting. We really appreciate it. We'll do more of these lives, probably once a week. We got a show coming up on Friday with the welding lord, Zach Arnold. So we're going to talk about Division 5 metals, from specialty metals to all of Division 5. So it's going to be an exciting show on Friday with Zach. We'll be live again, and then the show will come out on the podcast in a couple weeks. So thank you all for listening, and that's going to be this episode of the Construction Corner Podcast.